This week for week 2, we are looking at chapters 2 and 3, which actually go together really nicely. They're basically looking at some of the foundations, the theoretical perspectives upon which organizational communication is built today. So it's a good foundation and it's a good way for us to start. So, for the sake of time, I'm going to keep the chapters separate. So you'll probably get 2 lectures here in the same format, sort of a combination of PowerPoint and embedded video. Decided to forego the Prezi for a little bit this week. I'll probably use it later on in the course for variety. So in chapter 2, we explore the classical approaches. Realize that I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, knowing that you can pause it. I'm also going to not go into as much detail as what's in the text in terms of some of the specific subpoints, but hopefully I can illuminate some of the general concepts that are important for you. So if you are ready, let's begin. Okay, so the first thing your book goes into discussion of the machine metaphor, and this is really important in understanding the basic mindset of the first 3 theories of management, classical management, that are discussed in this chapter. And you'll see the 4 main categories: specialization, standardization, replaceability, and predictability are illustrated there nicely. Okay, the infamous Charlie Chaplin, many years ago, did a short little portrayal of his not very favorable opinion of the classical approach to organizations, and we'll take a real quick look at this. It's not long. Hopefully it'll work. Okay, so that video just sort of gives you a little bit of a glimpse of the whole view that organizations are nothing but machines. We're just cogs in this wheel, and it just goes and goes and goes, irregardless of what condition the worker is in. And that's the whole precept behind the machine metaphor. So we're going to look at 3 classical management theorists in this chapter that laid the foundation for organizational management in the early part of the last century. So the first, of course, is Fayol, who was a French industrialist of the late 19th and 20th century, and he's considered the father of modern operational management theory. And his basic approach has these 2 tenets of elements of management, and you'll see there are 5 of them, and they're listed here, and 4 principles of management. Now, these principles of management are a little bit more lengthy, and each one of them has their own subtypes. So here are the 4 main categories. There are 3 dealing with organizational structure, 3 with organizational power. I'm sorry, there are 6 in organizational structure. That's a mistype. And 3 in power, 3 in reward, and 3 in attitude. So he has a very interesting approach, and I think it's really important to understand that. Okay, then we took a look at Mr. Weber's approach in the textbook, The German Sociologist. Again, the same era. He was actually in the same time period as Henry Fayol. So Max Weber's approach, somewhat of a sociologist. He was a little bit of this ideal. This is the idea of, the prototype, the perfect organizational theory. In fact, it's important to understand with a lot of these approaches in these chapters, these really are prescriptive and not descriptive. In other words, they didn't describe how organizations actually worked, but they were rather theories on how an organization would best work, models, if you will, the ideal. So, with Weber's approach, there are these 6 facets of bureaucracy, and they're all very clearly defined. The hierarchy, the division of labor, authority is in one place, and that's with management. It's closed systems. Rules are important. In terms of authority, there were 3 different types: traditional leader, charismatic leader, and the rational or legal type of authority. And again, all of those are clearly explained in your textbook with a little bit more detail. The third classical organizational theorist we look at is Taylor. And Frederick Taylor has this theory of scientific management, and it came about through some dissatisfaction with some of the other approaches. It sort of was his incentive. And there are 4 major tenets to his scientific management approach, and you'll see them listed there. That there's only one way, one ideal, best way to do the job. And of course, we know who has that one idea. That it's important that you select your workers carefully, that you train them well, and that you understand that there is a fundamental difference between management and workers, and a very, very condescending view toward workers who are basically, viewed as of little intelligence and if useful only for their physical labor. So, a bit interesting. So, in terms of communication and classical approaches, your book very importantly goes and looks at these 4 things: content, direction, channel, and style. And you'll find those 4 aspects of communication looked at in not only these classical approaches that we've looked at, these 3, but also in the theories or the approaches that are explored in chapter 3 as well. But regarding the classical approach, what is the content of communication? Well, it's all about getting the job done, so it's very task oriented. Well, how does communication go directionally? Well, typically it's all between the manager and the subordinate, and it's typically top down. There's not a whole lot. We don't really care about what the worker says or thinks, so there's really not a whole lot of need for upward, so it's predominantly downward. What was the predominant channel of communication? Well, a lot was in writing to make things clear, and it was very formal. Uniforms, ties, people were addressed by their job title. It would be Supervisor Smith. Yeah, it would be President Smith. So the job title was very, very important and a part of the style of communication. Nowadays, does classical structure exist? Yeah, actually it does. In a few locations, those of you who have military background, you'll know by looking at some of these things as you are reading through the chapter, that's very much smacks of military bureaucracy. A lot of other organizations, nonprofit manufacturing service organizations, tend to operate a little bit more classically. What does an organization look like that's not using classical structure? Well, there you have the division of labor, more blurred, where the manager is just as likely to get down and sweep up a mess as a fundamental worker. There's a lot of cross-functional teams that you have different purposes that your job or your team might be responsible for. A matrixing of tasks having to do with when this happens, then we do this, and it's more of an acknowledgement of the intelligence of the worker to figure out exactly what they need to be doing when, and with that comes along a much freer flow of communication. So that's pretty much it for this. I would like to mention one thing. What I'd like you to consider is in your textbook on page 34, it ends with discussion questions. And on, like I said, page 34. I would really like for you to look at discussion question number 2 and number 3. Can you answer those? Do you understand the similarity and the differences between the 3 classical theorists that you've explored in this chapter? What's your critique or your criticism of those theorists? What's wrong with that approach? And if you can generally answer that, then I think you've got a good grip on chapter 2, and you can move on toward chapter 3. And that's it.